heading southbound. I've been hellbound, riding on the midnight train. Going too fast now, think I'll slow down, standing in the pouring rain.
What's going on, guys? Tristan and Tony back with another episode of the One Hell of a Life Outdoor Podcast. Sorry I missed last week. I was editing for our new video series, but I'm excited to be back. And tonight we got an awesome guest. That's, I think, the third time we've had Dr. Brad Cohen on the podcast. And Brad, thank you for coming back on. We're excited to talk to you.
I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. If you guys aren't aware, Dr. Brad Cohen, he runs the Cohen Wildlife Research Lab. And I know probably just about everybody that listens to our podcast follows that. So good detailed stuff coming up, and we're going to pick your brain again, Brad.
Man, I'm looking forward to it.
So circling back, one of my big takeaways from the last time we spoke, and if you guys didn't hear this one, go back and listen to it. But, we just recently got back from hunting Florida's Forgotten Coast. Mm-hmm. And we've started a new video series this year that's headlined by Frog Dogs called One Hell of a Duck Season.
I saw it. It was good.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching. We appreciate that. But we got into the Buffies, and the whole time I'm sitting there telling everybody that we're hunting with, did you know that these things nest in a tree, they said, how do you know? And I said, because somebody that I know knows what they're talking about told me this.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so that was one of my big takeaways, but it just resonated when we were out there hunting that day, Tristan.
Yeah, no, I know, it's crazy to think about.
It is. So I guess if you wouldn't mind, Brad, just start off for folks that are first time hearing you. Just kind of give a little bit of background about yourself and what you guys do there.
Sure. So I'm a professor of wildlife ecology over at Tennessee Tech, and basically my lab does applied research on a bunch of different game animals. Primarily right now we do a lot of wintering waterfowl research, and so we're looking at how habitat management and things like hunting pressure affect winter distributions and behaviors of waterfowl. And then we also do stuff looking at their breeding and migration during spring and fall. All in all, trying to get an idea of what they're doing and when, so we can inform policy. So we work closely with our state and federal partners to just kind of put the science to actual use. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the biggest takeaways that I had from the last time we had you on, Brad, was the studies that you guys were doing in and around refuges that border public land. As far as the common misconception of like, oh, if you don't move these refuges around, you're really all the ducks are going to sit there and they're going to imprint and all that. And I thought it was really interesting how with your guys' research, you basically, and you can dive back in and touch on this a little bit, but basically stirred up those refuges to try to kick the birds up out of there. And it really, the people around the refuges might have shot for like 5 minutes if that's what I remember right. But yeah, it really didn't make that big of a difference.
Yeah, so let me dive into that. So what we've been doing is for the past going on 6 years, we've been putting on about 150 GPS transmitters onto mallards a year, and we've expanded it over time to gadwalls and black ducks and some other waterfowl. But basically, we catch them during the winter on state and federal refuges, and then we watch what they're doing, and we get ducks that give us the typical duck will give us about a year to 2 years of data, so we can get their return migration, all like that and all that. But the big impetus for the first part of the project was trying to understand, the role of refuges for both waterfowl distributions and how they affected hunting opportunity. And so what we did was everyone around here either, I think refuges are pretty polarizing, right? People think like they're the reason people have ducks, and some people think they're the reason they have no ducks, right? That all the ducks are on the refuge. So the idea was, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to mark these mallards. And at the same time, we put out these acoustic recording units, which are just recording ambient sound. And we can actually hear the number of shotgun volleys that occur. So like, tow, 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 that's one volley. And so we are in a pretty stable environment where like people hunt out of blinds and they hunt consistently. So it's a pretty good study design. And we go in and we disturb the ducks, and we did everything from like just walking around the refuge to like rallying them as hard as we could for an hour, like ripping through 100,000 ducks. Now it's only an hour and it's not shooting them, although I don't think it would have mattered if we had shot them or not. But man, what we see, those ducks it scared the crap out of them. But instead of them like jumping into your decoys, they knew where all the pressure was. They weren't going to do that, right? They just flew in circles until we left and then landed back down, and then they settled down and didn't move really for the next couple of days. And so people around the refuge started to get frustrated when we would disturb the refuge. People who the whole time thought that it was the best thing ever realized, like, no, you're just messing with the ducks.
If you had to speculate, Brad, when you have, let's say you're the average public land hunter and like you just have this great day, and it's not necessarily a day that's like influenced by major migratory patterns. It's just they wanted to be there that day.
Yeah, today's a good day, right?
Right. Do you, just speculating, do you think, because obviously from your guys' data, there's a lot of like, you'll watch one mallard that's tracked, he does the same exact thing like every day, but every once in a while they might variate from that. Do you think it's, when they variate from that, do you think it's like maybe a younger duck that's a group of younger ducks that kind of tricks them to go with them, or just speculating like what gets some of these ducks to deviate from their daily flight pattern, I guess I would say?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's something actually I don't know if I've thought much about, right? Because most of our ducks get into a repetitive pattern. Once they find safety, they just kind of keep going back and forth to these safe areas. What we know deviates. So when we look at like individuals that like switch refuges or like change their repetitive behaviors, there's really not much of a difference between adult and juveniles. There's really not much of a difference between males and females. Males do a little bit more jumping, but like when you're like all of a sudden you get like this kind of hey, today was the right day to be here. I often wonder, and this is me thinking out loud, if somebody bumped a bunch of birds out of an area that they had just been hanging out on, not a refuge, right? Like, but just like, they shot up a hole and all of a sudden, a couple hundred to 1,000 are redistributed in your area. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
When we see things, when I see ducks like switch their thing, I think like, yeah, they got into a different flock, right? Like, but it just happens so rarely. When our ducks are down here for 90 days, we published a paper that showed that across 90 days, they have the
Duck hunters, y'all need to check out Williamson Outfitters down on the Florida Panhandle this season. They offer some of the best coastal duck hunting and inshore fishing east of the Mississippi, targeting species like redheads, bluebills, buffleheads, and canvasbacks, just to name a few. From the cast and blast packages for those who love to fish and hunt, to adrenaline-pumping layout boat hunts that get you up close and personal, Williamson Outfitters has it all. And when the day's done, unwind in comfort at one of the 2 amazing lodges designed to make you feel right at home after a successful day out on the water. Mention the One Hell of a Life podcast when booking and get 10% off your booking. Spots are filling up fast, so call or text Captain Chris today at 850-251-8650 or visit www.floridaducks.com.
In our area, they only use probably 2 refuges the entire time, and 80-something% use 1, to be honest with you.
Wow.
But some use 2, but that's across the entire wintering time. So like, the only time they're shifting their behaviors or their patterns are whenever they forage out a place and then go to another place. Otherwise, it seems pretty repetitive.
I gotcha.
Interesting. So, I thought of something that I don't know. I don't think we've talked to you about this, but this is something I would love to get your input on is, so Tristan, I don't do good with remembering numbers, but explain to Brad the series that, and we'll go ahead and shout out Delta Thunder Outfitters on this, the series of just annihilation of ducks that they had at one pit over the course of several weeks.
Yeah.
Tell them what happened and what they did and how it didn't make a damn bit of difference. All right.
Well, I mean, it was just one of those deals where I think it was like 18 days in a row they limited out of that pit, and it just makes you wonder. It's like, why they...
And Brad, there was so many days in a row that he took a group in, they limited it out, and he took another group in at 8 o'clock and they limited it out, and then they got out of there.
Yeah.
Where was this? What state?
Arkansas, northeast Arkansas, outside of Jonesboro.
And it's just weird that you get the same, in the same pit this year, is not doing that great so far.
Right.
But it's like, it's so weird how you get these huge swings in what ducks will do in the same area.
Yeah, and the water shifting, the flooding.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. Yes, that's the answer, by the way.
But it's Cache
Water.
River. I mean, it's
Yeah, I've hunted the Cache a good bit. I love it's a great good area, but I don't know, like you look at these rice fields and the water on and off on these in the bottomlands and stuff like that. We see the same thing with our ducks with when river tributaries change, basically flood out, and all of a sudden this habitat becomes available. If you have a consistent landscape that has water consistently at the same levels, I think ducks are pretty boring. When you have a more dynamic system, that can get them to change up. So, in a place like the Cache River, if it floods over its bank and gets into some of those places, you're going to see some, or if, somebody's rice field that's holding a couple thousand ducks where nobody's disturbing them, all of a sudden they sit that blind or push them off there, you're going to see ducks moving around a lot more. So I think dynamic landscapes result in that kind of like inconsistency where all of a sudden it's really good for a couple of weeks, and then next year you're sitting there like, what did we do wrong? And the answer is that like some farmer this year didn't plant corn, they put soybeans down. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Does that make I think that's really the answer most of the time.
Well, and when it comes to the timber, it's just like and you might know this better than us, but isn't it true that like white oaks, that they have like a every so many years they have like where they just explode with acorns? Is that right? Do you know that?
Yeah. So red oaks and white oaks are similar in their patterns, and basically let's think about it every 8 years. And out of every 8 years, you're going to get two bumper crops,
Okay.
where they just go crazy. 3 to 4 okay years, where they're just decent mass, and you're going to get about 2 failure years. So it doesn't matter if it's a white or red. If we compare it to like, back in the day when we had the American chestnut, which was remarkably consistent. Nowadays, oak trees are much less consistent than the traditional mass producer. But when you get a bumper crop, you're in the money. The thing is, I don't know how many of these hardwoods are truly producing nest anymore. We've cut so many out. I don't think ducks are in a lot of these green tree reservoirs for the food.
Yeah, I see. Well, and that does bring up, I remember looking at this debate on Arkansas duck hunters one year, and it was the debate of if mallards eat acorns, and then you got some people that are sitting there going, the paper's white, it's white, it's white, it's white, but they see black, and then you got a guy that's sitting there going, all right, here's a video of me pushing one up out of its
Oh yeah. They love acorns. They love acorns. I mean, listen, acorns, it's just like a deer, I would imagine. Like, it doesn't matter how much ag you have, when those acorns are dropping, those deer will be in the woods. It's, acorns are super, super preferred for mallards and wood ducks and stuff like that. They're just remarkably spotty. Like, it's just the, your green tree reservoirs nowadays, there's 2 different ways you can think about it. The green tree reservoir that naturally flooded back in the day just doesn't really exist as much, right? We've had so much river degradation, these quick floods or these floods that happen, and then we catch the water and keep water on. That's not good for an oak tree.
Right.
And so like over time, even these bigger trees are going to just drop less. So like, I don't know, probably on a well-managed green tree reservoir that does everything right, you're getting really good mass production. I've hunted a farm where it was a WRP that started very early and couldn't catch water. Just when it flooded, and massive amounts of acorns. But in general, very little. I think they use it regardless. I think they're using it more for cover than they are for food.
This really stems into something that I've never thought about before. And maybe I'm wrong, but when we are as hunters and we put in a food plot for deer or whatever we're hunting, we can get so psychedelic with fine tuning that to make it like, I want that biologic field from that commercial. You know what I mean? And so you do that, But I wonder how many people out there, and I'm just innocently asking this question on public land and private land, that look at their GTRs and say, what's the best way for me to maximize this crop? You know what I mean? I don't know that if we just kind of take woods for, in my opinion, I think people just kind of think, oh, the world will take care of the woods and it'll do its thing.
Yeah.
But maybe there's some people out there doing it. I don't know.
It's a really interesting question. I did a lot of deer research back in the day, and there was some research done by, I think it was Craig Harper out of the University of Tennessee, but they had even looked at like something like fertilizing oak trees. Did you get a more bumper crop of acorns if you fertilize them? They said, if they found out, no, right? Like, a lot of times, and then you go to GTRs and you already have pretty good quality soils there. What really is going to dictate your crop year to year, like you're just trying, besides the inconsistency thing, you're just like trying, I think green tree reservoirs are criminally mismanaged. They basically, we manage it in a way that's optimal for our hunting and not optimal for the trees. And I think this is a big issue right now going on in Arkansas, for example, where they're
Dave Donaldson.
Yeah, like that's a great example. I mean, if you want to have trees 20, 30 years from now, what they were doing is probably not going to, it's going to kill all the trees, So, and the way that probably first plays out is you just produce a little less acorn, you don't grow as fast, all those things. It's death by 1,000 cuts, not one thing. But I think it makes sense that if you think about what used to be, how oaks are, and all these green tree reservoirs are kind of meant to function with periodic flooding throughout the winter. And then what we do, which is we just catch water and just leave it on. It's not a great environment for them.
Yeah. It's amazing how many people that don't look at that whole debate. And I don't want to get too, down this rabbit hole, but don't look at that whole thing from a factual, like scientific standpoint on like what's good for these oak trees. Because there's a lot of conspiracies of like, oh, they're doing it so the private land guys can get more ducks, and that's why they're not flooding it's crazy.
Right. Well, I think there's the hardest thing to being in a scientist who also hunts is under, I guess I see a lot of confirmation bias constantly. Like, we think what happens to us in the blind is the way the world works. And then when you actually, when you're actually out there and watching what's going on, or you're measuring things, you get a real accurate estimate of what's actually going on. And oftentimes the two are very different pictures. And it makes it really hard when you're managing wildlife and you're like in the state agency where you're trying to be like, we're trying to manage for like future generations. And you guys are thinking, well, this is how the world works because this is how I've experienced it. And it can be really difficult. I don't envy those people that have to, the state agency folks, I mean.
Yeah. It's got to be, hats off to those folks because they're under a lot of heat all the time and they handle it pretty damn well.
Well, and one thing I will give hats off to AGFC on this is when they had the public hearing about what they were going to do, Dave Donaldson, and I still haven't seen anything that's talked about the leak of Lake Ashbaugh, but that's another topic. But they said, we screwed up. They came flat out and said, we messed up, but now it's time. Let's quit worrying about what we messed up and let's fix the damn thing, And I love that approach. And they've got so many engineers involved and everything. And what they're really, you probably know this as well, is that they're really trying to bring it back to what it was, with a little bit of advantage to the WMA, I guess. But they're really trying to reestablish the natural flow there, and I think that's just really cool.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really important for the future. As we learn, we got to adapt, and that's and that's with everything. That's why it's not just Arkansas green tree reservoirs. It's anybody that floods timber. It's short. When I say they're critically mismanaged, it's difficult to put it that way, but. For the long time scale, for the time scale, if you want your kids to eventually be able to hunt the same place and your kids' kids, then they're critically mismanaged.
Yeah. So Brad, do you have any duck stories that are top of mind with your guys' data so far this year? That's just like, holy shit, that's not to put you on the spot too much, but just like, holy shit, that's crazy, data-wise.
this year, some cool stories that we had. I'll go with cool, and then I'll go with more sciencey.
Mm-hmm.
We had some ducks that were flying and caught a good tailwind that they flew over 100 miles an hour while they were migrating. Like they caught a tailwind and just went. And I just to me that just sticks out as unbelievable. Right?
Well, think about going down the road on a 4-wheeler at 25.
Right.
I can't.
That's the biggest predictor. We run the data, and we're in the process of publishing this now. But what best predicts a migration event is actually a strong tailwind more than anything, right? So I don't know, and I'm not talking a tailwind at our level. So don't ask me how they sample it, but we're talking 1,000 feet up.
Wow.
Right? So that something clicks where they know it's this is the right conditions, and they catch a good tailwind. And so, they're migrating a lot of our ducks are migrating typically at 70 to 70-ish miles an hour, but some of them are going as fast as 100 miles an hour consistently for 6 to 8 hours. They'll do 600, 800 miles in a single go.
That's crazy. That's
truly amazing, right? You just think about that duck is flapping its wings nonstop, 8 hours, going 100 miles an hour.
Goodness gracious.
It's amazing. And I've never really thought about it from that perspective, because everyone's just oh, north wind, which I'm sure obviously the north wind, it's advantageous to them migrating. But
right.
It might be a north wind that, up 1,000 feet up's not.
It's in the teens that morning, and maybe you're chasing ducks or geese. But now it's September and it's 85 degrees and you're hunting early teal or geese. As a waterfowler, you need dependable weather protection that will not break the bank. Founded in 1996, Frog Togs is not only the leader in breathable waders technology, but a company you can depend on to keep you warm and dry, head to toe, no matter your hunting environment. Stay bone dry by using discount code ZD315 for 15% off not only your first purchase, like most discount codes, but how about every single purchase you make from now until December 31st, 2024?
Not very strong, like you were saying, one day, and then the next day it's way stronger. So that's interesting.
And then you think about okay, well, all that time they also have to navigate, and their ability to navigate it just blows my mind constantly. We had a duck that we recently just came back online that had done the same exact migration track, almost never strayed it more than about 100 miles from its migration track in 2 years. So it did the exact same loop, went to the exact same places, stayed on the exact same line for 2 years straight. I mean, their ability, for such a small brain, their ability to kind of orient themselves with no cues, right? There's nothing there, to orient themselves with no map and be able to do the exact same thing. It's mind-boggling. We had a teal that went up towards the Arctic Circle and is back. And came back here. Those type of things just blow my mind, man. We're talking 3,000-4,000 mile trips, and their ability to just be we're back. It's unreal. Makes you appreciate them so much more.
It's amazing to think about, because just from being humans and being a human and trying to navigate without, granted we're not looking at things from the sky, but and maybe following a river system, or I don't know, but
your guess is as good as mine.
It's amazing because of how easy it is for us to get lost in the woods without Onyx and Huntwise and whatever. So
we're so smart.
Yeah, right.
Right.
It's just, it really is amazing. There's something we don't understand there, obviously.
Yeah, there's just, I think a lot about the idea that too oftentimes we try, and I'm just as guilty of it, is we're sitting in the blind and going, the ducks are flaring, or why aren't they landing? They should have landed. That turn should have been it, and it's we try to anthropomorphize every single thing, make it if I was that duck, what would it look like to me, and how would I fix it, right?
Yes.
And when you try and study them and you start looking at it, you're God, man, there's a lot going on here. We don't see the world, we don't feel the world, we don't hear the world like they do. And so it's really hard to figure out, maybe just today they didn't want to be with their friends. I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. We get antisocial every once in a while.
You're right. And so those type of things, when you start looking at this data, you're just they're more fascinating now. Every day that goes by that we do this work, they're more fascinating to me. I mean, they really are. But those are the cool things, science wise. We had a really good year publishing. We published like 15 or so papers, which is the currency for academics, right? And some of the cool stuff that we were putting out was we did everything from like looking at high path avian influenza. We work closely with St. Jude's of all people. They're a center of influenza excellence, so they're one of a few in the world, and they are part of the World Health Organization. And the guy who we work with, the lab that we work with, is critical for like informing what strains are going to be in the flu vaccine, right? Like just really really rewarding work on a personal level. Like, who gets to say they work with St. Jude? Like, that's a great thing. And so we did this high path avian influenza that's been going around. That's the price of eggs are higher now because anytime a poultry organization tests positive for this high path, they got to kill all the chickens, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. We're watching these ducks as they migrate in areas with greater waterfowl distributions. These duck distributions, these migration paths these ducks are really important reservoirs for high path. Like, they don't actually get sick, right? Our data says that they act just like a duck that isn't infected with high path avian influenza, and so they're really good reservoirs for the infection. So as their density builds up, we see like outbreaks occur, right? And so we just tested an area, for example, in West Tennessee that had high path. Our ducks tested positive for high path, and then a poultry farm tested positive a couple days later. That's interesting, like that's way beyond like, hey, I like to hunt. That's affecting people's everyday lives, and to be able to be part of that science is really cool.
Yeah, no kidding. Holy cow!
Wow.
So there's carriers for it.
Right. So we swab. So it's not a fun thing for the duck. We swab its mouth and its cloaca, like its butt, for avian influenza. And basically, though we're isolating out all these strains of influenza because these, basically the way we understand the way flu works is it goes from birds. Birds are kind of the reservoir. Then a strain will transfer from birds to mammals, and maybe from mammals to us. And so, like what we're seeing now with like bird avian influenza in cows, I don't know if you guys have heard of like avian influenzas in dairy cows.
No.
Yeah, so it's in dairy cows, and like you shouldn't be drinking. For example, I would highly recommend not drinking non-pasteurized milk or something like that. You shouldn't do that right now.
Okay, so
pasteurized milk. Pasteurized milk.
So don't do old school and just
don't be doing that.
Don't drink from the hose.
Right. You got me freaked out now because
but like and people are getting sick. People are working in dairy farms getting sick. Well, anyway, those strains that we're isolating out are going into a database that will help inform, in the future what strains St. Jude's and this lab recommends to the people in Washington to put in the flu vaccine for next year. So it's really cool, really rewarding. Who would have thought working with ducks that we would be, part of that chain too? It's really fun.
Wow. That is so super cool.
Insane. Yeah, I would never.
We could do a whole podcast on that. Yeah, no, I mean, seriously.
It's fascinating. I mean, just, that stuff, after going through COVID and understanding what a pandemic looks like, it's kind of on the other side looking in of like, okay, here's the monitoring part of like, we're trying to monitor what could be the next strain that comes out, and will that strain be the next pandemic? And, it's really rewarding, and it's also really sad and scary because, the second COVID ended, the funding for surveying that stuff dried up, right? And so like, you're like, are we doomed to repeat history? It's interesting being on the other side of it.
Yeah, I imagine so. Did you have something to add to that, Tristan?
No, I was just going to say, me and my wife have been doing this Whole Foods diet. And one of the things is raw dairy. I don't drink raw milk, but we've been eating raw cheese. So now I'm like, all right, I'm not doing that anymore.
All right. So I actually saw this thing on TV a couple days ago about like raw cheese, and raw cheese that is bought from a supermarket has to be aged like 90 days or something, some minimum amount. And the idea is that listeria and all these other bacteria would die out during those 90 days. So you're probably good with raw cheese as long as it's, not like a couple days old. Okay. But unpasteurized milk, don't be doing that.
That sounds good.
The people that are getting this strain of bird flu are getting like super sick. It's not like they're getting flu; they're getting like hospitalized. So like we're be taking all precautions when we're sampling ducks. Now luckily it's you would have to like a duck would have to sneeze in your face like 20 million times for you to probably get it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like if you kill a duck and it has high path, you walking around with it. But I would say to anybody that's listening, like, if you're hunting and you're grabbing a bunch of ducks, I probably wouldn't be like rubbing my hands all over my face constantly.
Right.
Like, I'm very aware of that now. You know what I'm saying?
Or going out and chasing that dumb duck that you're like,
that's right.
You know,
that's that one that's the one that's like that snow goose that's sitting out there in the middle of the field without any friends. Yeah, I would probably let that one be.
We were in hunting camp on opening weekend a couple years ago, Brad, and we're having, just your typical duck camp. We got a big fire pit going and all this stuff, and all of a sudden, thunk, and a freaking spoony hen ran right into a damn pecan tree right there, and we're like, okay, that's not normal. I mean,
kept getting her try
and it was that year that there was a lot of outbreak of that.
Yeah, that was like during the peak of it, and she.
Well, there you go.
And she wouldn't fly away. Like, she would fly like 20 yards.
Oh yeah, yeah. So like, I think it's species specific. There was a paper that was published. I think it was a ringneck or a scaup. I can't remember, but it got very, very sick with high path and died. It's very rare that you can actually time putting a GPS transmitter out with a duck that tests positive for high path. We had an outbreak with our mallards, and our papers showed that like the mallards that were infected and weren't infected acted for the most part seemingly completely normal. Like both of them were just ducks, Yeah. And so that's so the bigger ducks maybe species specific, but like a spoonbill running.
Do you want coffee that doesn't suck? Get the Duck. Dirty Duck coffee is made specifically for the waterfowl enthusiast. Enjoy flavors like Morning Wood, Dark Dynasty, Cinnamon Teal Snickerdoodle, and First Flight to unlock the flavor that you'll enjoy in the blind for years to come. Our friends at Dirty Duck Coffee Company are now offering all Zero Duck 30 followers a 15% discount when you use code ZeroDuck15 on your next order.
Into a tree, I'd avoid that duck. Right?
Well, and I think one thing to mention that's important about this with the avian flu, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brad, but waterfowl ducks live with this. Regular avian flu exists all the time, just like we have the regular 100%. Flu. Yeah,
it's like a cold. It's like thinking about it as like that's called low path, and low path is a very common continuous infection throughout the population, almost like a cold for us.
Got it.
But high path is there's a lot of really good research out there. This is relatively new to, and usually when it came into North America in previous bouts, it would disappear. Like it would all of a sudden, like it would go through the population. That would be it. But now it's been here several years, and it's basically endemic now in the population. And so, it's not just waterfowl, it's killing a lot of other species of birds. It's concerning for something like hawks and eagles, right? But for waterfowl, even if they're not dying from it, they're serving as a reservoir for it. And on the other side of it is that, it's never good when you have something with this much virulence, an ability to kill animals. Just endemic. And you know what I'm saying? Like, I was talking to someone, what they do to test how deadly a virus is they actually inject it in the ferrets, right? They isolate the virus out from a bird and inject it into a ferret. And some of these strains that they're injecting in the ferrets, like, are wrecking the ferrets. Like, it's very, very, some of these strains are very, very virulent. So you just want to be careful. And I didn't mean to, turn this into a disease talk, but it does. I have learned a lot more than probably I ever wanted to. Maybe I'm overly cautious, but I have no problem touching ducks with bare hands. That's not what I'm talking about, but I'm definitely not like sniffing a duck or, picking my nose after I carry a bunch of dead ducks. And it's been a good hunting season, right? I handled a lot of ducks, but I'm not messing around, if that makes sense.
Well, I think you treat it the same way as, I grew up, honestly, when I field dressed a deer, I got taught how to do it, and then after that, it was all caveman. Literally just, if you had some snow to get some of the blood off your hands, that's fine. Yep. If you didn't, that's okay too. You showed up the greasy spoon with blood in your fingernails. Just all that. But there's a little bit of common sense, I think, that you put into it, and you're just like, as I got older, I was like,
yeah, why take the risk?
Right. I'm not gonna speed right now. You know what I mean? I'm gonna take it back a notch and just, it doesn't hurt. And it's something simple just to do, just like no different than like everybody talked about during any kind of disease, is just wash your hands. If you wash your hands, it really does 100,000,000% higher chance of you getting sick if you just wash your damn hands.
That's right. I hate to be like the, I'm really not this clean freak, but I have whatever it is, the antibacterial, spray or whatever for my hands, the gel.
Yeah.
And when I get back after hunting, it's in my truck, and I just, before I touch my steering wheel, before I mess around too much, I just put it on my hands and call it a day. That's just.
Don't clean a bunch of ducks and then go eat some French fries.
Seriously. But
be smarter than that.
You asked what's going on with my research, and that's been the most, I'll be honest with you, from a personal standpoint, to say, I work with St. Jude. My mom, who, she doesn't understand, she knows, oh, he does wildlife stuff, but everybody knows St. Jude's, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, my son works with St. Jude's, so
that's great. That's great.
Right.
Brad, we want to be respectful of your time, because I know you got a hard stop in about 5 minutes. This is like a dual question, because I have to get these two questions in. One, I'm watching the old Duckmen and praise of poor Phil Robertson that's going through what he's going through right now. God bless him and his family. But he talked about ducks smelling you. All right. So that's one thing. I want your 10-second commercial on that. And then the second thing is, we can have a follow-up podcast. Just tell me yes or no. Have you guys found, with the way the cadences work with the drakes and the hens, mallards specifically, we'll just use them as an example, that there's a meaning to the tone or what they do with that? Like, say a deer snort means danger. I want to know if there's some data in there that you guys are starting to pick apart what this means, or beast.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. I can answer that one with a solid no. We haven't done anything with that. It's
all right. Well, you
question.
Need to.
Okay. The second part of duck smell is something that is increasingly interesting to me, because they obviously can smell. I don't think they can smell people, and they can't smell at a very close distance or at a far distance, but I think they can smell each other, and I think they can smell food at a close distance, right? I think that, basically they use their eyes to select the general area of where they want to be, and their nose and their eyes to figure out exactly.
Because they do have a long nasal passageway, right?
Right. But it's hard to, it's multiple, it's like two things that go on there, right? So it's like the length, but really it's the surface area and cell density that tell you how good you're going to smell. Like, if we look at something like, right, so if we look at like us, we've got not a bad, we have a pretty long passage, but like we have very low cell density, very low surface area. We can't smell very well. A deer probably has, something where along the lines of 1,000 times more surface area than us. Does that make sense? Just because they have increasing folds. You know what I'm saying? Does that get you? So like,
like an elephant, like a bear can smell better than an elephant, or no, an elephant. That's actually, it's just the opposite.
Well, the good way to think about it is like a bear can smell as well as a coonhound, and a coonhound can smell a lot better than a deer. You see where I'm going with this, right? Like it's, you can't tell anything, but I look at a duck and I go, and this is just like, okay, simple me. It smells the least important thing that they rely on. Yeah. They're more like a turkey in that sense, right? Like, I ain't worrying about smell. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. So they're not smelling a rice field from Canada and going, it's time to go.
No, that's it, man. And when we can learn how, I want to talk one day about like, how does a duck know that's the field I want to eat in? And then, one duck brings a bunch of other ducks. Well, who's the first one? Is it just like, hey, there's water, I'm just going to eat there, right? But they just seem to find things weirdly, right?
Yes.
Like, and so I do think smell matters. I think ducks dabble and just do boring. They just do stuff. They're bored. They're there. But like, we put out a pile of wheat when we're baiting in a forest of buckbrush. There's no food there, but within hours after the ducks get there, they might be all on top of it. Like, how'd you find it? How do you know it's there?
Right. How'd you tell all your friends?
Right. So like, like we dumped it in the murky water. You can't see that. So there's something smelled there, but that's about it.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, no, we'll have to talk about it soon. Look, thank you for your time. This has been very informational, very factual. I call this a power podcast is what this has been, man. And we'll get to talk to you again more. But, man, thank you for your time. Thank you for your research. Thank you for your students. Good luck to all of you that are doing what you're doing. We appreciate everything that you're doing for this environment and our hunting. And really just a general understanding of the study of the species of animals that you guys encountered there.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right, Brad. Thanks. Have a good
I've been southbound,
All right, see you guys.
I've been hellbound, riding on a midnight train. Going too fast now, think I'll slow down, standing in the pouring rain.